Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind introduction, and I will dive right in. So I will talk about AI security in the context or against the backdrop of this concept of responsible AI. And if we could go to the second slide, please. What is responsible AI? Thank you. And I have to admit, I do not see everything on my screen at once. So if I help me, please, okay, with the slides and so on. So thank you very much. So we hear so much about ethical AI, responsible AI, trustworthy AI, and it still can sometimes seem as if those terms are kind of fluffy. But actually by now, responsible AI has a very clear profile. So responsible AI, the term is understood as a set of good governance guidelines that are composed of a set of common principles. And those principles usually include privacy, data governance, accountability, auditability, robustness, of course, security, transparency, explainability, fairness, non-bias, human oversight, human in the loop, and all those really important principles. So there are various sources for those responsible AI principles. I think that's good to just have this background that there are so many guidelines and actually even legal requirements out there already, which overlap in those basic principles. So some of those guidelines for responsible AI were published by public organizations, including the UNESCO, the Council of Europe, the OECD, the ethics guidelines by the European Commission. Others were published by nation states. For example, China has ethical guidelines for the use of AI, but also, of course, the US White House blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights from October last year is a very good example. Or, for example, even intelligence, so such as the US Department of Defense, they also published their responsible AI strategy already in 2020. And by the way, they just followed up with an announcement that they're establishing an AI security center at the NSA these days. So there's also a lot of awareness around those topics, especially focusing on security. And then we have countless self-regulatory initiatives by companies, Microsoft's responsible AI standards. They have tons of really good guidelines, papers, playbooks publicly available. We have Google's responsible AI principles, Salesforce trusted AI principles, or Facebook's 5 pillars of responsible AI. Plus, then we have all those standardization bodies that also focus on exactly the same guiding principles in their work: ISO, IEC, IEEE, NIST, of course, with its AI risk management framework. They all offer guidance. And like I said, most of those AI governance frameworks overlap in the basic definitions of principles. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what role does security play as a responsible AI principle? A big one. So it's definitely center stage. And to be a bit more concrete what that means, let's, for example, take a look at OECD's AI principles and what it means in regards to security, or the principle of robustness, security, and safety. So this according to the OECD, AI systems should be robust, secure, and safe throughout the entire life cycle, so that whether under its foreseeable use, misuse, or other conditions, they function appropriately, and do not pose unreasonably safety risk. What the principle then also emphasizes is traceability. So keeping a detailed record of everything that happens during an AI system's lifecycle, from the data it uses to the decision it makes, and then systematic risk management in each phase of the AI system lifecycle on a continuous basis. So that's like the overall goal or principles that we should pay attention to, which is of course very challenging. Next slide, please. We'll get to the challenges in a bit. I just want to mention some policy developments related to secure AI. Some of the latest ones are for sure the executive order. So on October 30, you have for sure come across that. US President Biden assigned a 100-paper long executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI. This executive order has a very, very broad scope and in general is aimed at federal agencies. But also the order stipulates that developers of the most advanced AI systems are required to disclose their safety test results and associated data to the US government, focusing on foundation models that could threaten national security, economic stability, and public health. So apart from this very specific requirement for AI system developers, so of highly impactful systems, the executive order evolves around 8 fundamental principles with a lot of tasks for federal agencies. And the very first principle at the core of the executive order is new standards for AI safety and security. So, like I said, developers will have to share safety results for powerful AI systems, but also several federal agencies, including, of course, NIST, are asked to develop standards, tools, benchmark tests for AI system safety, all within a very short time frame. So we will see a lot of new reports and new guidelines coming out in the upcoming months. There's also some specifics for dangerous biological material and related federal funding for content authentication and watermarking. But in general, the requirement by the executive order is that federal agencies establish an advanced cybersecurity program for AI. And also there will be a national security memorandum developed by the National Security Council and the White House Chief of Staff. So we will see so much development in this space coming up. Next slide, please. So also the EU AI Act is most likely coming up. I mean, they're still in negotiation. They have a lot of quarrels right now, a lot of new proposals, especially around foundation models and if they should be regulated themselves or only the applications. So kind of messy, it seems, last minute. Not that responsible from my perspective, but nevertheless, if it will be passed, which is likely, but not sure, then the EU AI Act will have AI security requirements covered in Article 15 of the draft. It will particularly require high-risk AI systems, and someone asked in advance in the comments when I posted this event, what are high-risk AI systems? So either so there's a long list of suggested high-risk AI systems currently. So for example, biometrics, critical infrastructure, education, law enforcement, migration, etc. And also high-risk systems are systems that have safety components or subject to existing safety standards, for example, as we have for toys or medical devices. So those high-risk AI systems, they will have to be designed with security in mind. Of course, aiming for these general appropriate levels for accuracy, robustness, safety, etc. But it really involves that you will need to use state-of-the-art measures based on specific market segments or applications. They will have to implement technical solutions, so not only policy declarations or some contracts, but technical solutions to mitigate AI-specific vulnerabilities, including preventing, detecting, responding to, resolving. So I think we will see the AI security space also necessarily improving in its maturity and in its guardrails and its guidelines due to those very clear legal requirements that will be coming up. But as we are not there yet, so the work at the European level in terms of standards is just beginning. So in fact, a lot of standards will have to be developed alongside the new regulation or even afterwards. Notably, for example, ISO 27090, that's on AI-specific mitigation and controls. Of course, we also know that ISO is not public. So we will see if there are accompanying guidelines that are accessible to everyone. I think that would be very important. Next slide, please. So in general, when I look at all those things that I will mention in the next slides or the documents, And in general, if you look into research papers discussing how machine learning can fail due to adversarial attacks and other non-adversarial issues, the research area, the field is so immense big. I think it's really almost overwhelming. It's really hard for practitioners, engineers, lawyers, policymakers. So for all of us alike to stay updated on various threats and defenses related to machine learning systems. But of course, as ML and AI becomes more widespread, it's even more important to do that, to understand failures. So what we see in general in all those documents that I have seen so far is that they really emphasize that on one hand, we do need specific threat modeling and security practices, so specific to AI and machine learning, but usually they also emphasize very strongly that first, it is really important that you have traditional security, threat mitigation, and mature practices in place. So I mean, you know this best. So things like access control, secure software development practices, code reviews, vulnerability assessments and penetration testing, patch management, monitoring, logging, incident response planning, authentication, training, awareness programs, and the like. So all of this is very, very important for the AI ML space as well. This is the foundation for everything that it comes afterwards. But at the same time, there's this need for new ways of thinking about threat modeling for AI and machine learning systems, and also prioritization of mitigation strategies. And the research and publications out there, they stress that this can really only be addressed through collaboration between security engineers and data scientists, because the specific threats related to AI and machine learning that especially data scientists have to make themselves familiar with, because they're the ones who will need to implement mitigations as part of the threat modeling and security review process. So what are those and where can we find overviews and orientation? So in my research, I came across various adversarial machine learning threat taxonomies to categorize and address AI, ML specific threats, with the threat landscape, of course, continuously evolving. And next slide, please. So NIST. NIST has come forward with a draft very recently. The draft is from March, and the public comment period has only been closed end of September this year. So NIST has this public draft of the publication Adversarial Machine Learning, a Taxonomy and Terminology of Attacks and Mitigations. And this paper covers attack lifecycle stages, attacker goals, capabilities, and then it also goes very much into detail of specific attacks and mitigations, in particular around evasion attacks, poisoning attacks, model poisoning, and privacy attacks such as membership inference, memorization, data reconstruction, and model extraction. And what I just want to highlight here is that the challenge that NIST also points out. So NIST is really highlighting and acknowledging open challenges in AI system security. So it says very clearly it is very hard detecting when a machine learning model is under attack. It's also challenging to detect out-of-distribution inputs, which may not conform to the data distribution the model was trained upon. There's this challenge of designing effective mitigations to powerful attacks. I mean, this is all kind of worrisome, but nevertheless more important that we look into it and also acknowledge that there are challenges, because otherwise I think many of us could feel as if we're not on top of our game or not getting it, but it's a real challenge that we're all part of. There are challenges around data and model sanitization and regarding techniques for robust training, which would be defenses against data poisoning attacks. So I can really recommend this paper, very much so. Then next slide, please. Another body who has looked into secure AI and machine learning is ENISA. That's the European Agency for Cybersecurity. They have published their report on securing machine learning algorithms in December 2021 already. This report offers a high-level machine learning taxonomy, also identifies cybersecurity threats, 2ML algorithms, and finally also attempts to list security controls, so more concrete security controls already to address this vulnerability, also taking into account ISO 27001 family and NIST 853 framework. And those controls are then linked to the machine learning taxonomy. But in general, this document, while really worth looking at, also, I think, communicates that we're at the beginning. So it's not that it's a very mature, we have everything figured out, but it also emphasizes that there's research and new development of controls needed. Another report from Europe that I haven't put in the slides, but want to mention because it goes more into nitty-gritty details of mitigations, is from spring this year. It's by the German Federal Office for Information Security, BSI, and they have published a report on AI security concerns in a nutshell. And there they also focus on attacks against AI, and they list very concrete defenses with the goal to particularly raise awareness among developers. So I think all of these are really great resources to dig into and to be aware of. Next slide, please. The same is true for, so that it's really worth looking at, is true for Microsoft. I think they publish so much really practical, hands-on material. So I can recommend looking at its adversarial machine learning threat taxonomy. It's in a blog post titled Failure Modes in Machine Learning in its security blog, in Microsoft security blog. So this is a taxonomy that came out of Microsoft's Ether engineering practices for the AI working group. It's all part of Microsoft's responsible AI efforts. And this is meant to enhance current threat modeling practices in the software development lifecycle, especially for products or services that interact or rely on AI-based services, or that build services and products using AI ML. And what I find especially valuable in this resource is that it's really accessible and very practical, because it lists so it has a long list of concrete questions for security reviews in this area, which you can see here as a screenshot top left corner, that goes on, and it's really hands-on, so that you can start with really, bringing the team together and asking really concrete questions. I think that's also an approach that you would see in the NIST AI risk management framework, which I haven't tackled here, haven't mentioned here, but I recommend looking at it. I also published some blog post on the AI risk management framework recently, and this framework also has a playbook. I think it's called Playbook on the side, with very, very concrete questions that you can just start discussing or thinking of in your team. So both of those have those very hands-on approaches: the NIST AI risk management framework and Microsoft's blog. Next slide, please. Then we also have Google. I just also wanted to mention this, that it has introduced in June its Secure AI framework. I think we also see here that we are very, that developments are very recent, as this was only, like I said, published in June. That's a conceptual framework for ensuring security of AI systems. It also came along with a practical implementation guide, which you see here, the picture. The Secure AI framework has 6 core elements. So again, strengthening security foundations. All the documents emphasize this. And then it goes into extending detection and response, automating defenses, harmonizing platform controls, adapting controls, contextualizing AI system risks. And so I think that could be a good accompanying document if you want to look at the others. But I've also heard it's not that concrete, so I'm not sure if that's the one you would start with. I'm not sure. But what I also find interesting, that Google has in July, so only a month later, for the first time ever published its report on, so it has introduced its AI Red Team, something that is also very recent. but nevertheless very prominent, because red teaming is was even supported by the White House, as you might know, or is emphasized in the executive order. So Google has introduced the AI red team in July and explained in a first report what red teaming is in the context of AI systems, why it's important, what types of attacks AI red teams simulate, and lessons they have learned so far. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm sorry, how many more minutes do I have, just to be sure?
Yeah, we have 15 more minutes.
15. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
And we have a Q&A towards the end as well. So.
Okay, thank you so much. We're now at the slide security and generative AI. And I just wanted to dive into this a little bit because it's omnipresent. Of course, in the area of generative AI, implications for cybersecurity are also highly relevant. There would be a lot to say, as vulnerabilities within generative AI can be exploited by malicious actors to extract sensitive information, and there are successful attacks and new papers coming out on attacks like jailbreaks, reverse psychology tactics, especially prompt injection attacks. So cyber criminals can use generative AI tools to launch various types of attacks, from social engineering to phishing, automated hacking, malware creation. So I think we are have to be worried where this will be going. And I think especially in that context, international cooperation is extremely important. On the other hand, of course, generative AI tools can enhance cybersecurity measures, and we see a vivid startup ecosystem trying to mitigate or use generative AI for enhanced security. So we could have automated cyber defense reporting, threat intelligence, secure code generation and detection. Some examples that are commonly listed as tools that can enhance security. And this paper that so this overview is from a paper that, if you want to dive into this intersection of generative AI and cybersecurity, it's definitely a paper I can recommend, because it gives this broad overview of pros and cons and how you can use it, and some common attacks and opportunities. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then, so how fast-paced this space is, we can also see that OWASP published its first version of top 10 large language models risks only in August this year. But 2 weeks ago, it has already undergone its first update with the release of version 1.1 already. This update brings introduces this infographic that you see here. So in general, it tries to better bridge this gap between general application security principles and the unique challenges posed by LLMs. And this key change is in this version is the inclusion of a visual data flow illustration for typical LLM applications, where potential vulnerability areas are highlighted. So on the right-hand side here, you see the top 10 vulnerability areas, and then they are mapped in this data flow illustration. So they're mapped to the data flow, which I find really unique. I haven't come across another infographic that would demonstrate that so well. So for an instance, it illustrates the data flow between an API and an LLM production service, which could, for example, be vulnerable to prompt injection or denial of service attacks. And I think that they updated this so quickly really reflects how fast the space is moving, and the fast advancements in generative AI, and it really provides a valuable resource for developers again and application security teams to address LLM related security concerns, because they also, of course, go into details how to mitigate those risks, and it's a very valuable resource. Next slide, please. So thank you. So here I did not structure this perfectly well, but I want to this is my last slide, and I want to mention a variety of mitigations or approaches that I have come across during the last few weeks, how to address those things, those risks. So especially in LLMs and generative AI. So what I've heard very often is that the starting point in many organizations is a comprehensive LLM AI policy. Maybe you already have one in place, maybe not, but there are many things that can be already tackled, or at least from a kind of a, I mean, security policies are important in general, but at least from a kind of a liability or responsibility perspective. So usually those LLM AI policies, they govern the usage and of LLMs. For example, you define permitted use of LLMs. So what can they be used for? Acceptable use policy. Then you can define what confidential information you prohibit to be entered into the LLM. We could also put in the policy which AI-generated content should be reviewed as an initial starting point. We could also require fast checking of LLM-generated content by other staff members, so 4I principle. We could require that AI-generated content is labeled as such, or also prohibit the generation of inappropriate, objectionable content, or discrimination based on protected characteristics. So all of those things can be addressed in an acceptable use policy. What we also come across very often is data sanitization, so really implementing strict input validation processes to prevent sensitive data from going into LLM applications. There are also some techniques or startups that, for example, offer PII, so personal information scraping, as an intermediary step between your prompt and when it gets sent up. So then sensitive data would be automatically scraped and then reintroduced. There's, for example, one startup that is called Private AI. If you want to look at it, Google is doing the same. It also has a blog post about this. It's also interesting. Then very often, really always, red teaming is on the table. So red team adversarial testing to identify potential vulnerabilities and weaknesses in LLM applications. What is also stressed is monitor and logging, so continuously monitoring logging interactions that can sometimes be combined or done via trusted execution environments. So I also see that there are a couple of startups offering secure enclaves to run LLMs or prompts in the secure enclaves, which is a hardware-based secure environment where the code runs in this environment, and apart from this is encrypted. So you can use the TAE, Trusted Execution Environment, as a safeguard for proprietary data, so personal information or IP protected information, for example, during inference, fine-tuning, or model usage. There's several startups that offer that already. And in general, if you want to get an overview of startups, I mean, it's not only about the startups, it's also about their approaches, right? There is this really good overview of the Ethical AI data bank. So it's a website and an organization that puts together, I think it's quarterly or semi-annually updated, an overview of all the startups in the responsible AI space, including for security or governance, and also has those confidential computing startups on its map, and maybe you can explore a little bit further what is like up to date or current developments. Then we also have a variety of AI safety plug-in tools. So for example, what is very prominent is NEMO guardrails by NVIDIA. So NVIDIA's NEMO guardrails, that's programmable rules for user interactions within applications. So for example, to restrict a chatbot to only answer specific questions and decline discussions about, I don't know, for example, competitive products. Then there's also another open source platform, this is called Guardrails AI for output verification. I've heard good things about it. I have not used it myself. Of course, I'm like not a developer, but it verifies LLM outputs through independent verification systems. Then avoid sensitive data in prompts, I've already mentioned. And then there are other tools which I would call observability tools. So which can help with real-time performance monitoring, error detection, or model drift detection. And then in general, I think reinforcement learning with human feedback is more like on the developer side, but there are mitigation practices for things like hallucinations that could be used, I think, on a broader basis, for example, by using retrieval augmented generation. I heard it's not that difficult to implement. So retrieval augmented generation techniques seek to optimize LLM outputs by retrieving facts from external knowledge bases, for example, the internet or internal databases, which help to provide more targeted information without modifying the underlying LLM model itself. So I think this is a very up-to-date approach that we hear about more and more often. So that was my presentation. I hope there were some pointers and I could give some overview of some resources that you can find. And I'm now looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Katharina. I think there are a couple of questions on the Q&A tab. I'm just going to post the first one, which is QTS data. What is the EU AI Act considering as high risk in AI system? Can you just explain that a little bit?
So yes, the EU AI Act will have, I will not like talk to that too long, but they will have like this unacceptable risk, prohibited AI systems, then high risk systems with a lot of requirements, lower risk systems with some transparency requirements, and then those systems which have hardly any requirements. And high risk systems are, it's still under discussion, what will be the final list of high risk systems. But in general, there will be an annex to the draft. And I'm sorry, I'm just looking actually because I said it before already and I have some notes here, but nevertheless, there will be a list, and it, for example, in employment context or in educational context or for law enforcement. So there will be a list, an annex with specific applications or application context that will indicate that you have a high system risk. So there will be a list. It's not only self-assessment.
Understood. I hope that answers Nevin's question. Another question that came in through one of our channels is, are there any specific strategies or tools that you recommend for orgs to secure their implementations of LLMs?
So, I mean, yes, I mean, I definitely would recommend looking at at OWASP's top 10 vulnerabilities, and they have all the mitigations for them as well. So it really goes into detail what to do. And in general, I think that apart from OWASP, very clear, very accessible implementation guide is missing. I haven't seen it. So I haven't seen it. If you see it, I think it would be very useful. I do know that the World Economic Forum, the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is based here in San Francisco, they have several working groups, 3 working groups on AI governance and generative AI in general. And one of those working groups is AI safety. And they are really working on a very practical implementation guide for secure LLMs or generative AI in general, because I do think it's kind of hard, because OWASP, I mean, it is more focused on developers, and if you're like the CISO or a general security professional, it's not really our field, right? Like how to do it, how to train models or mitigate risks in LLM. So these general frameworks, I think we're at this point where we really need to summarize and synthesize all the information and knowledge that is out there. But apart from the things that I have listed here, I do not know of another further guidance that is this perfect guidance that is so easy to follow. So I would recommend starting with the ones I have already listed.
Yep.
So may I close my window?
Yes, for everybody, we'll be sharing the deck post this session as well. So this has been a completely actionable session, especially with security and the responsible AI principle. But one of the very curious things that even I wanted to know, considering that, we have to mitigate the security risk in large with LLMs, and considering that companies are going more global, we're seeing a very upsurge in social engineer attacks using artificial intelligence and generative AI. And, having those kind of policies implemented, while we see the EU AI Act and NIST AI risk management framework coming along, I just wanted to know overall, how would you recommend building awareness to organizations when they want to avoid such, mitigate such risks?
I personally would start with identify or asking who is interested in various departments in your organization. So, I mean, in security, in legal, in product, and also, people who where you would not, in HR. I don't know. It really does not really matter that much, because you need to pull together some kind of first working group. So everyone I asked, like in bigger organizations, like how would you start it? They all recommend just start somewhere, pull together some people who are interested, and then use, for example, NIST AI risk management framework. Not in this. I know it's hard. It's really difficult to. It's not easily accessible. You take it, you read it. It seems so very high level, but in fact, it's not, because this playbook, and then identify one use case. For example, you start with one use case, and you okay. Sorry, I do it differently. You pull together a group of people. You say, oh, those responsible AI principles, they are like omnipresent. Do we have one in our organization already? Then you say, like, what are our values? Can we align with this? And I would start with a policy document. But then, of course, you very soon have to go into the conversation. What does it really mean for us? Because most organizations, I conducted a study last year on AI governance. Most organizations had those AI responsible AI guidelines, but 80% of those who had it said we have difficulties putting it into practice. And here the people I talked to and asked what could be done about this said, start with one use case. I use ML in this and that use case. And then with this group of interested people from different departments, you say, what do those principles mean for us in this context? And then the playbook, the NIST AI risk management framework playbook, has so many questions. And then you could just start by saying, addressing some of those. Which of those do we want to address for this? And then just think it through. And I personally think that it's so important that we have a safe space for doing this, because all of this is so new, cutting edge, and so overwhelming, that I think it's very important that we share, the safety when talking about those things, that we don't want to be smarter than the other person, or that we're scared that we don't know enough, because it's just normal. I mean, we're really facing something so new here that we have to really start from feeling that we're in the same boat and tackling this together. And it's okay not to know everything, but we just want to be engaged, start looking at it, and do whatever we can. And then also, of course, document it. It's always good to document every effort that we do.
Yes. I found real high value in the blog post that you wrote recently on the AI risk management framework. I've also linked it in the chat for anybody who wants to check it out. You can directly go and check it in there. We'll probably just take one more question before we close the session. Alexander had a question where he wanted to ask, what is your opinion on a decentralized AI systems related to security? Is there any status quo?
So I struggle with a common understanding of decentralized AI systems. I'm not 100% sure what you mean. Do you mean federated learning? Because I do see that people, or do you mean blockchain? So I'm not sure, because it's used differently. So depending what you mean, you probably do not mean federated learning. You probably need, I don't know what you mean. I'm so sorry. It's me, it's not you. But I mean, I know that in federated learning, for example, we have a lot of security issues, and we need to combine it with other privacy enhancing technologies, such as differential privacy, or even, I don't know, TEs or so, I don't know. And in blockchain security, that's not my field. And blockchain is something that, I mean, I think there are so many open questions in distributed ledger in terms of, for example, privacy. I mean, I come from privacy, so that this is something I always think I will not dive into too much, because there's no enforcement from my perspective anyways. So I'm so sorry. I will try to find some resource on that question, try to understand it better, and then I can maybe post something. But I'm not up to date with questions.
You've linked a LinkedIn on the chat as well, so anybody who has further follow-up questions can definitely write to you. And I'm a big fan of Katharina's content. I would recommend everybody here to drop a follow, hit the notification button, and follow the content that you put out.
Please, and also, contribute. If you have the answer to this question, let's just, in the comments, share things, and that's how that's the only way we can move forward. I think, together.
Yes, that's how the community works.
Yeah, community.
Yes. So Katharina, it's been wonderful to have you on this session. Real actionable items that we have here. We'll be sharing it across to our audience as well, along with the key takeaways. I recommend everyone to get in touch with Katharina if you have any follow-up questions as well. Follow Sprinto. We are going to come up with a lot of learning sessions and webinars moving forward as well. Again, Katharina, it was wonderful to have you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. I hope to see you on